All right, everyone. Welcome to the Audit Credentials. This is episode 3. As many of you know from this channel, another passion of mine is music, and I couldn't think of anybody better to bring on here again than my own father. What's up, Faja? How you doing?
Hey, Matt. How you doing? How you doing,
Doing good. Doing great. Glad to have you back on here. And then, of course, my good friend Joe, fellow teacher in the district. How's it going, dude?
What's up, Mr. Burrows?
Nice. We've been talking about doing this for quite a while. I've sent you my dad's music a couple of times, and it's been fun because we talk back and forth about. You always ask me these questions like, "Hey, what kind of equipment does your dad use? And how do you play this? How do you play this?" And I know that you've done just an amazing job in this town of not only promoting music in general, but putting on these really cool shows, and the Kiss show, and of course the Queen show. I mean, there was just fantastic stuff that you've been doing here, and I thought it would be great to have you on here to talk to my dad and ask him the questions that I can't ask because I don't know.
Yeah, right on, man. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Anything musical, I love it. Let's go.
Heck yeah. All right, so Dad, you just had an album come out recently, your second studio album, and can you tell us a little bit? I mean, like, how do you think it compares to the first one overall?
Well, let's see. The album came out August. I think I released it on August 21st, and I think this time I learned a little bit more about the plugins I was using for mastering and for the mixing process of it. I think it came out a lot crisper and clearer, and studied some elements of adding low end into the mix, right, like what they do for hip hop records, and didn't want to make it like a basic rock sounding album or a jazz fusion album. I wanted to have some deep separated bottom end with good mids and stuff like that. So I think it came out a lot better actually than the first one.
Nice. And that's looking through a tinted lens, which again, the artwork is super, super cool. That was something that stood out to me. That was all taken by Elida, correct?
Right. My wife, Elida, she was over in Europe with my oldest stepdaughter, Jackie, and they were over there taking pictures of everything. So the idea came up like, well, why don't you use some of my pictures for your album or for your singles or whatever? My wife said to me, so I said, well, let's see a bunch of pictures. So they, the ones that we use, they'll have a concept of looking down, and it kind of narrows in as you look, and something of the sky and some cathedral that they're in Italy. I thought, man, let's just put them all on there, and then kind of like a Pat Metheny look, just put my name on the side. And Pat Metheny is a jazz guitarist that I admire immensely, but his album covers kind of look like this, and I didn't want to cop it straight up. So, right. We'll make the transition between the pictures a lot smoother, right? But that's how the artwork came up.
That's awesome. Joe, have you had a chance to kind of listen through the album here and there?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what kind of stood out to you just from a first listen through?
Well, the production, first of all, and it's tough being a musician who tries to do things like this. I mean, Bobby, I'm jealous. You pulled it off. But like the technical side, so much goes into recording. So you listen to a lot of things at first with technical ears. And like I told people, I miss being 12, where you heard a song on the radio and you just liked it because it was a great song. You didn't,
right.
You didn't say like, oh man, the bass is a little low, or oh, that guitar's a little tinny. You just liked it, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then when you're in the world of it, then you start listening to it with technical ears. So I've learned though, it's almost a skill you have to reteach yourself. I've learned to just put the tunes on while you're doing the dishes, while you're eating dinner, while you're just whatever, because then you're just listening to music because you're kind of preoccupied. So the first thing that stood out to me was the production. It was unnoticeable, if that makes sense, and that's a compliment. Like nothing stood out like oh, that sounds like it was done on a 4-track, or that it was like it blended in with my satellite radio, and this whole week I've been listening to Van Halen. They had a whole Van Halen channel because of his passing, so as a tribute, we've had that cranking in the house all week. And then I would put it through my phone through the iTunes. and then you didn't notice a major difference. So there you go. I mean, and I'm sure Van Halen has spent millions recording his, and I don't know if Bobby spent millions or not, but the production sounds great.
I'd like to.
yeah, of course. And by the way, the album cover reminds me of Letter from Home, Pat Metheny. That's actually what, Matt, it caught my eye on your Facebook page before I even read what you typed. I saw that and went, oh, Matt's a Metheny fan? And then, of course, I was like, oh, it's his dad's record. So that's awesome.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, though, because when my dad was making this album, he said, hey, I want you to listen to a few Pat Metheny songs. And I thought, well, I'll check them out because I listened to Rippingtons growing up. My dad and my mom both listened to them. And I enjoyed it. I actually played it on a couple of my YouTube videos, where I'm showcasing some things and I have it on in the background. And it's very relaxing music, kind of world jazz. He said, I'm going to go for this kind of a feel.
Nice.
And I mean, my dad knows, I listen to a wide variety of music. His style of music isn't what I listen to regularly, but I know that his music is going to be really, really well received when I hear it and I keep playing it over and over again, even though that's not my main focus or the place that I hang out for my music. And that was something that stood out right from the get-go. As a fanatic of music in general, I know what sounds good and I know what kind of needs a little bit of work. And there's a huge difference between the first and second album. I mean, massive difference production-wise. That's what stood out to me, man, for sure. I mean, So Shines a Good Deed in a Weary World. That's going to be the first song that we play on here. I think that he sent me a version of it prior to it being on the album. He said, what do you think of this track? And I think I listened to it 6 or 7 times, like looped over and over. I'm like, oh man, this is, I see where he's going now. I mean, Dad, do you feel like you were able to kind of spread your wings a little bit more now that once the first album got out, you got your first album out there and you started getting more comfortable with, what production software are you using again to make your music?
Well, my DAW system, or the recording system, the digital system, is Logic Pro, Apple product. And the one thing that I think was a game changer on this is I purchased a plugin from Waves. It's called Abbey Studios. God, I can't remember it now, but it's a simulation to where you're actually in Abbey Road Studios over in England, and it has the speakers up front, mid, and far away, the big, huge subs in the back. So I went over, hours and hours upon listening to it through each speaker, and it helps you get a real good balance because I can't turn up my monitors here in the house in my house studio too much, right? So you listen to it through headphones, and it simulates what you're listening to through the actual speakers. So, I spent a lot of hours doing it on each track, but I think that was the big game changer as far as overall mixing and mastering on the production side of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
now,
Joe,
Matt, a couple of bands you may have heard of, the Beatles or Pink Floyd. They recorded Abbey.
Pink Floyd as a kid. Yeah, thanks to my stepdad, he played it nonstop. So yeah.
So they recorded at the infamous Abbey Road Studios, and that's interesting, Bobby. I didn't know that existed. That's a cool thing to check out. And technology's come so far now where they can literally put you in room 3 in Abbey Road Studios because it had a little bit of echo coming out of the corner. It's crazy how advanced they get.
Exactly. And what you can do is in this particular plugin, you can pin down to what headphones you're using.
Oh
you
my
can
gosh.
give it direction. You measure the side of your head. So as you turn, the camera, which monitors the studio, goes with you so you can hear it from all different angles.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
It's really awesome as far as mixing that goes. Like I said, because sometimes I'd be up at 2:00 in the morning and I can't turn on my monitors because everybody's sleeping. My wife's sleeping. Right. So, do it through headphones. And then, of course, after mixing it through that, I'll check it through several sets of speakers to make sure that it sounds consistent throughout the whole thing, and compare it to other tracks that I have from other artists. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. We used to do the car test. My friends would cut a demo, and back in the day they would put them on a CD, and he's like, throw this in your car. And that's how we listened to most of our music back in the day. You popped it in your 6 CD changer, right? But we put it in there on shuffle just to see how it would hang with the other songs.
Right.
And it was eye opening. Sometimes it was usually a bass issue. Usually you had too little or too much bass. I realized because just like you were talking about headphones, monitors, us non-millionaires, we're not mixing with humongous monitor, beefy subwoofers in our bedrooms here.
Right.
So you get the headphones are not going to give you the bass that the car is going to give you. So you have to compensate for that, which is, you got it down. It sounds like you do the headphone mix, you do the other monitor mix. What are you using it for your home monitors? I'm curious.
I just have a pair of M Audios. I can't remember the model number, but they've got 8-inch. I cannot remember the.
Are they kind of flat, flat response?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's not extra bass. There's no extra highs or nothing. Very flat response.
Yeah, so, I got little. I'm looking at them here. 6-inch events. They were a pair of events. They were on sale at Guitar Center 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and they still work. So
excellent. I could upgrade, but for right now, because I'm using that Abbey Road Studio plugin, I'm satisfied with just kind of going for that with the monitors I have just for basic sound, and then I'll hone it in through. Yeah, it's really, really nice. Kind of expensive, but well worth it.
You get what you pay for, man. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
It's interesting what you both are talking about, especially you, Joe, is the whole listening through headphones as compared to being in a car. And that's the thing my dad and he definitely gave me at a young age is to really enjoy music through a pair of really good headphones. And, he always, when he sends me demos, he goes, make sure you listen to these through headphones.
Right.
On a Bluetooth speaker. And it's just amazing. You can really tell the subtle differences between the first and second album when you're listening on a pair of headphones as opposed to just throwing it on in the background. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Dad, I think that is what you're going for. You really want people that are, pure music fans at heart to be able to enjoy this music. You made some songs, as you've told me, that are going to appease to a general audience, a greater wide variety of people. But I think some of your best music are the songs that you can really pick out, a minor detail and listen through it for it the whole song. And that's, you raised me to enjoy music that way, so it's kind of neat that you also make music that way. Joe, do you ever have that, or Dad? Am I right with that?
Oh
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. Well, I was going to say the separation in the mix was very important because each part to me had a part to play in the music, the song itself. So, like maybe if you were listening to You and I, which is like the big seller off the album, the strings play an emotional part in that song. And they had to be in a place where, not hard banked right or left or something, but use some type of stereo imaging. So it you can feel the emotion in the song. So yeah, that was the whole plan through the whole album, actually. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I feel like that's the headphones. There's no better way, I feel like, unless you're in an auditorium with a 8.1 surround sound, of course, but the headphones give you the surround sound though, and if it's mixed properly. I literally remember being a kid, probably 9-10 years old, and I had a Wish You Were Here album, Pink Floyd, and it's so cliched, but I literally would get lost in that album as a 10-year-old with the headphones on, as lost as I get as a 48-year-old. I know, Matt, I don't look 48. I know. Don't say it. Don't say it.
35, dude. It's all good.
But, it's the same feeling. It's the same exact feeling I got when I was a kid. Right. And, of course, now times 1,000 albums later that you listen to with headphones. The only thing that's just, when you start adulting, who got the time to sit down and immerse in a whole album, so.
Exactly. A song or two, maybe, yeah.
You're right. But I make it a thing. People sit down and watch movies for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
My thing, and it's funny, when my stepson was living at home before college, I used to put an album on. He's like, "Oh, let's put like the game on in the background," and I can always be suckered into watching a baseball game, of course.
Yeah, right.
But I would say, "Hey, let's just listen to the album," and then he got used to doing his homework. We're talking about 5th grade, 6th grade, but he would do his homework with music on, and then he started saying, "Can I choose the music?" of course, you know, like
Right on.
that's what it's all about. Yeah. So, you know, so back to your album, Bobby. I have not given it a listen to with the headphones yet. So,
well, why don't we take this opportunity to do it for everybody? I think if anybody's got a pair of headphones around, go grab them, because we're gonna listen to the first track. Why don't we start with You and I? You were just talking about that song, Dad. I feel like, as you've told me, that is the most popular song on the album up to now, right? So
Right.
I'm gonna get this thing queued up, and for me, I will just say, when the album came out, 8:00 our time, Joe, because we're awesome, we're 4 hours behind Eastern time.
Right.
I put on the album, put my headphones on, and just started listening, and that was the very first one, other than the ones that you'd already sent me, that was like, this song is it right here. And of course, my dad's like, I kind of whatever. I'm like, no, this is it. So let's check this. Let's check this song out. I'm excited to listen to this. So here we go. All right, so that was You and I by Bobby Burrows, the one and only. Joe, thoughts?
Man, it was a treat listening to it with headphones, to be honest with you. But caution to you kids out there. Don't listen to it streaming on a YouTube thing when there's some hiccups in there.
Yeah.
But the three of us know that doesn't happen anyway. And not when you're listening to the actual downloaded track. Which, by the way, buy your music, kids. Buy it. Buy it. This stuff doesn't happen for free.
Here's the I posted the Spotify link in the chat. That's a great place to start for sure. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Joe. I have a few artists that I A, I love their music, and B, I know them from chatting to them on a video chat or have chatted to them on Messenger, and I always make sure to buy their music to support them because that's the only thing that's going to keep them going.
So I mean, I know you wanted more of a musical vibe, so I was just plugging buying music for a second.
Yeah,
but honestly, so I think Bobby. I don't know you well enough to call you Bob yet. I hear Satriani first. Satriani kind of grabs me in there, and a little bit of Steve Vai, and then honestly, a little bit of I have no idea. So it must be you. Like I hear Bobby Burrows in there.
That's interesting because, to be honest with you, I've never really listened to a lot of Vi or Satch. Wow. I've heard a few cuts here and there, but I think that's mostly me. I mean, I can talk about my influences. I mean, when I was a kid, when I started, my brother bought me an album. It was called Chicago Transit Authority.
Oh yeah,
and this is back in 1969. And the guitarist was Terry Kath. Of course, the late Terry Kath was my first big-time guitar hero besides my brother. My brother played too. And so what I did, and my dad allowed this because he thought Chicago Transit Authority, which is now Chicago, was kind of a jazz group because they had horns. So that fooled my dad because my dad's a heavy jazz dude. And so he'd let me listen to that stuff. And so I would just study the guitar over and over and learn the licks all by myself because back then all you had was a record player with a vinyl record on there and you have to take the needle off the back, and back and forth. And so I'd ruin my records. But that was my first big person that influenced me along with my brother. Then I kind of went into a different phase. I heard Alan Holdsworth, but I didn't really go that way because that was like space music to me, who was a really good, extremely talented guitarist. I remember you playing him. Yeah.
But then Holdsworth is out there, yeah.
Yeah. But then I got into a guy named Buzzy Featon, who was in a band called Full Moon. Then I got into, in the 80s, I got into a band called Go West, whose guitarist, who's also passed away. Alan Murphy was very, very good. I listened to Pat Metheny. I listened to Scott Henderson, who I really dug. And then I got into Andy Timmons. So this is really interesting because a lot of the guys, a lot of my fans that are on Twitter, they'll message me and say, how do you get to sound like Gilmour? I go, well, I don't know. I mean, I like Gilmour. I like Pink Floyd. I've never been a really big fan of it. It's just, I love their music, but I've been more on the rock jazz type thing. But anyway, so I've been compared to that. And it's really strange because I've never sat down and thought, well, I'm going to sound like David Gilmour, or I'm going to sound like somebody. I just spent years and years and years trying to find the right tone that really suited me.
Wow. Awesome. Finding your voice.
Well, what I did actually, I mean, I'm talking over 40 years of looking for tone, the right tone. So I ended up I've played every guitar you can think of, from Les Pauls to Strats to Ovation, everything. Right. So I see this dude, Andy Timmons. I watch his videos on YouTube. I'm thinking, God, guy can shred. Then he's playing some jazz. I'm like, what the heck? And I'm listening to his guitar tone, and I'm looking at his guitar, and he's playing the Ibanez signature model. I'm thinking, well, God, I hate those RGs. I hate those things. But I'm going to go try one out. So I think I was on a road trip in Las Vegas. I think it was either Las Vegas or maybe Kansas City. And I tried one up. Holy, you know what? I mean, the neck is like a Fender Strat. Yeah, it's got that RG shape, but the pickups on there, it's what I was looking for. So that was back in 2011. So I got one.
Nice.
And that's what I use throughout all my tracks is that Timmins model Ibanez.
So I'm smiling huge here. Number one, my first real guitar. I had two. I had a Rental Aria Pro 2 was the name, and then I told my dad I need something better. I had a black Aria Pro 2 after that one, but again, I had them for 2 or 3 months each, and I needed something a little bit more. The Aria Pro 2 is on a wall in Queens somewhere, signed by Kiss. Not playable anymore at all. But my first keeper, like that I had for, gosh, I don't know, 5 years of high school, 4 years of high school. How long were you in high school?
4.
Was, 4, I hope.
Yeah, I did 4. Was the Ibanez. My dad took me to Sam Ash. Never forget this. Which guitar would you got to have for the Battle of the Bands? We had the Battle of the Bands, big gig. And I looked at the Les Pauls. I looked at the Fender Strats. And I looked at the RG 560, which at the time, Steve Vai played one with a handle on it. It was like a cutaway version.
Yeah.
But that one was like $2,000. So I said, well, that one doesn't have a grip. It's black. Let's try it. And I'm smiling here because, dude, Andy Timmins, do you know what band he was in the 80s?
Danger.
Yeah, which sounds nothing like the guitar mastery he's doing now. Matt, Danger Matt was the super uber hair band.
Big hair.
The cheesiest lyrics. I mean, the song was called Bang Bang and Naughty Naughty. I mean, terrible songs. Really? But that guy had tone and he could play. And he snuck it in on those 80s tracks. So he was someone that I even followed. He dropped out for a while. Like many of those 80s guys dropped out, but they all resurfaced. If they were real players, they resurfaced. Yeah. And he's a beast solo instrumental guitar player. Anyway, he's from Bayside, where I grew up. So I used to bump into him all the time, but when he was the guitar god and all the girls were talking to him, and I just wanted to be like, dude, what kind of amp did you use on your album? But he wasn't giving me the time of day, of course. But that's why I was smiling. Andy Timmins. And I heard a little Jeff Beck. A little Jeff Beck was in there, too. Come on.
Oh, yeah. I listen to Jeff Beck. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right on.
Speaking of meeting in person, I mean, Dad, what did you get to – because you got to meet Andy in person. Did you have a chance to talk music at all other than saying, hey, I'm a big fan of your music? I mean, did you get a chance to ask him anything musically?
The first time I met him was at the Tacoma Dome for a guitar show. He played there, and Ellie got me tickets to make sure we would go. And we sat in the front row, and then she took me out of the auditorium, and we got in line to have him sign some CDs or whatever. So, I had a chance to talk to him a little bit and talk about how, in his mind, the tone is also, I mean, it's the equipment you use, but it's through his hands and through his fingers.
Absolutely.
And he was telling me about his phrasing and how he studied jazz guitar. He went to Miami. I can't remember what college he went to, but he studied jazz guitar. He was already a rock player. He'd already copied, the guys from Kiss and all other stuff. He could play the shred stuff, but he wanted to learn jazz. And we talked a little bit about that. But the second time when we hung out with him at NAMM, that was 2019, didn't really have much of a chance to talk because there were so many people there. But so I did have a chance to ask him, though, the first time.
But, dude, you hit the nail on the head. And the older I've gotten, the older I've realized it is 100% in your hands, 100%. And I've seen pros say it. The what's his name? Nuno Betancourt from Extreme. Okay, who's another beast, but he played in a hair metal band, and he's known for the ballad More Than Words with, I bet you Matt has heard that song before. But anyway, this guy's got chops. He's got a killer tone for his genre, and they're still putting records out, by the way. But he was invited to Eddie Van Halen's studio. I'm a little bit of a Van Halen fan, by the way. He was invited to the studio, though, and that's like, you're going to the King's Castle if you get invited to Eddie Van Halen's studio. And Eddie Van Halen handed him his guitar, plugged in through the rig, and Nuno Betancourt, he tells the story better than I do, but he's like, I played his guitar in his rig, and he goes, I sounded nothing like Eddie Van Halen. And he was like, hey, Ed, I want to sound like, Burning with the Devil. And Eddie's like, go ahead and play it. And Nuno goes, what am I doing wrong? So Eddie takes the guitar, and Nuno's like, that's it, the same chords. And Matt, the same exact chords, the same pick and everything, same wire. It sounded like night and day. And it's just look, our bodies have electricity running through them. It's a biological thing. And then it's all about touch and feel. And there's no two guys are going to play the same lick the same exact way. I mean, Matt, it's like shooting a 3-pointer. Everyone has a different touch. I mean, seriously, you could teach someone the best technique in the world. They can mirror your shot and your follow through. Right. Everyone does it differently. Everyone has a different fingerprint on their hand. I mean, so music, I think it's all in the hands with the tone. You can give someone the most expensive gear in the world, and and then the opposites happened. I've heard Eddie Van Halen go on stage with a local band, not in Sitka, of course, in a video.
Of course,
with somebody's local band, and he said he sounds like Eddie Van Halen, and then the guy takes his rig back, and it sounds like cheesy amateur, like nothing. It's just bizarre how that works. It's like an anomaly. It's crazy.
Well, I can definitely compare musically though, because as my dad knows, I've taken a big liking to the vocalist side of things. And Joe, you play with a vocalist. I mean, your wife Jen, great teacher by the way. She is an amazing singer. Yeah. I listen to a lot of Dan Tompkins, and he's a lead singer at Tesseract, White Moth, Black Butterfly, and a couple other projects. And he does a lot of Twitch streams, and he speaks about how he sings and how his voice is unique. I could practice my entire life to sound exactly like Dan, but I never will, because it's the same as playing. So I could definitely understand that. I mean, you and my dad could never sound the same, no matter even if you were playing the exact same chords. So I think that's great. That's what makes music so amazing, is there's no two people that are alike, whether it's bands or singers or guitar players.
And the best test now is software, right? I can sit down in Bobby's studio, and if he's playing his guitar through a rig that's not even like it's not an actual amplifier. Sometimes the technology is so amazing now. You can literally plug in, and they have like your crunch tone or your English British cabinet and the Abbey Road studio room, right? And then he'll play the song, and then I'll play it, and somehow, and it'll drive you nuts, it sounds completely different. And I'm like, how are you getting that sound? I can't get that sound. Which makes music beautiful, because then everyone just does it differently. Which leads me to my next thing, Matt, that I'm going to throw this out as a challenge to all three of us. I think Bobby and I have to come up with a track where we can record on together virtually.
I would love it.
It can happen. And I have Logic Pro. I just got Logic Pro X, I think they call it now.
Yeah.
So it took me a month to learn all the darn, but I know how to use it. I've Dropbox files with my high school band. We're trying to recreate our high school tunes all through Logic, and you can just simply Dropbox files back and forth and get the project on your computer. It's amazing. And of course, this whole lockdown business this year really opened up that world to a lot of musicians who can't play live. I mean, my wife and I, we're looking at who knows when we could play live again. So what did I do, Matt? I went out and bought some gear. I bought a video light. I upgraded my camera. I'm figuring out how to podcast, because our gigs now are going to be through this computer, and they're going to be live. People laughing at me. Why'd you get a black backdrop? Well, it's because Jen and we're going to build a stage in our little extra Austin's old gaming room. It's gonna be,
man, hey, can I have the couch? Remember we talked about that.
Well, you're gonna be our production manager, and you're gonna make sure we could broadcast the stuff the right way. But that's why and anyway. So again, going back to the hands, you can get all the gear in the world, and
So that makes me ask that. Joe just got Logic Pro not too long ago, and I talked with you a lot when you first got it, and I was there when you were programming it on that old MacBook Pro, and things just kept dying on you. But from the first album to now, what would you say has been the biggest takeaway from using Logic Pro? Like, what's made you a better producer using that program as compared to when you first started fiddling with it and seeing
what did you use the first time?
Logic Pro, first time. But not the updated version to what it is now.
Okay.
But what I did is, when I was recording down in LA for Universal Music Group, that's what they were using. So Jovan wanted me to use it as well. That's how that all started, as opposed to the other DAWs that are out there. So I studied, I studied for months, researching on YouTube videos, got a booklet on what the different functions were, because back when I used to make records back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't digital. You go in, you have the big mixing board, and you only got a couple of takes. You couldn't, cut and paste and all that other junk. You had to do it live. So anyway,
paying for it.
yeah.
Right.
So it took me a while to get used to it, and I got comfortable enough to do Everlasting, the first album. Now with this comparing the second album, of course, there's been upgrades to Logic, but I'm more through trial and error more comfortable with the different aspects, the features that it has, and also with using third-party plugins. Logic has really, really good plugins, good sound library, and all that sort of thing. But I really dig Waves Company along with Sound Toys. Those are my two go-to companies, and so the plugins can bring out extra frequencies that can be present in the overall mix, and I think that has a lot to do with it. If that answers your question.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to pick his brain off camera because I have so many questions about that gear. I know the Waves Diamond bundle. It's overwhelming to me though because there's so much out there.
Right.
And then it's
Yeah, what I did, Joe, is I started small. Like I got advices from the guys in California. What would you use to really fatten up the bass? We'll try Submarine. Try Max Bass. So I started. I didn't get a bundle. I just started plug-in by plug-in and built it through the last 3 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if it's stuck and you liked it, then you just go in with that.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I'm dealing with opposite end here. I'm looking at my gear to my left, and because I do deal with a vocalist in the house, and so I had to buy some compressors. We bought some preamp, and we have racks now of gear. I need to get a rack stand actually, but I have this 11 rack is like my fake guitar, like interface. And then I put it all through my Persona stuff. But I am learning that all the brains are really inside the Logic Pro. I haven't bought any plugins yet. There's so many in there that I haven't even figured out yet. I'm getting decent sounds out of that engine alone.
Yeah, you can. And I use pretty much that alone on the first album. I used a couple of Waves plugins, but you're absolutely right. So I have a amp simulator that if I'm going to record stuff in my home studio, I have to use that. But, Waves makes vocal plugins that you don't have to have all that outboard material. So
Right.
Yeah, you're going to save yourself some money. But I get you.
Yeah.
Well, I have another question that's kind of floating around in my head, and I'm curious if, people that are watching, a lot of music people listen to have vocalists in it. I mean, I'd say the majority of music that we listen to nowadays has someone singing. So, Joe, as somebody who plays in a band who has a vocalist, how would you say? I mean, do you enjoy hearing music that's driven with guitars and non-vocal music just as much? I mean, how do you think it compares? Honestly.
Well, I mean, trust me, my frames of mind have changed over the years. You asked the 18-year-old Joe, and I just wanted to hear, loud guitars, Led Zeppelin, Kiss, Van Halen. I didn't even care what they were singing about. And looking back, I'm like, man, they're all singing about the same three things, two of which I can't even say on this podcast. So, and then as I got a little older, when I discovered Jeff Beck, Pat Metheny, Eric Johnson, all these instrumentalists, Satriani, Vai, especially because like Van Halen was waning at the point. Their writing style was changing, and I wasn't super into it like I was with the older stuff. But I was seeking more of that guitar genius thing. And I saw Metheny in concert, Satriani, and I just was like, Stanley Jordan blew my mind. Oh my God,
I remember him. Yeah.
So it was all about instrumental guitars, and then you meet my wife Jen, who, thank gosh, has this angelic voice. And we're trying to write originals now, and it's so tough for me because I don't write as a vocalist. I write as a guitarist. And she's never written as a vocalist either, So it's interesting, Matt. You got to put yourself in the frame of mind,
Right.
And I don't have a perfect answer for you because to me, at the end of the day, Jen and I say to each other, we just want something that we enjoy listening to. And the theory is, if we enjoy the song that we just wrote, someone else probably will too.
Right.
We're not writing Frank Zappa opuses that are super out there, super weird. Right. Yet we're not trying to target a genre. We're really just trying to please ourselves.
For sure.
We're not going to be millionaires doing this, but we will take those songs to the grave with us. And Bobby's got a bunch of albums. I wanted to ask you, Bobby, what did you record back in the 70s and 80s? Where's that stuff?
I have no idea. I think maybe the bass player might have some of those tapes.
We got to dig those up.
What was the name of the band again, Dad? I like the name of the band, honestly.
United Flight.
There we go.
And we were very, very popular up the West Coast, and our songs were played on some FM station here back when I was a kid. And we spent a lot of money on those recordings back then. And
I bet.
I'd never, I mean, through the years, I've lost all kinds of stuff. But I'll have to check and see if I can dig those up.
What kind of music was it?
It was rock, and then we had a horn section too towards the end of it. But it wasn't heavy metal. Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Nice. Keyboards, guitar, bass, drums, vocals.
And what was your rig like back then? What was your amp and your guitar?
My first amp was a Fender Bandmaster.
Nice.
That got stolen. Then I got an Ampeg.
Oh.
I think it was a B4. I think that's the model. And then I went from Ampeg to Marshall.
Right on.
And so I wasn't playing jazzy stuff back then. It was all rock. And, we were a top 40 band that we'd mix our own songs into, and we were playing all the time. And then finally, when Matt was born, it was like, man, I got to get a serious job because there were 7 guys in the band. We had a road crew. We had our own stage, our own lights, everything. I mean, it's a big production, but
wow, awesome.
I mean, yeah, those times were some of the best times of my my whole life, actually. I mean, it was so much fun.
What part of California was this?
Oh, this was up here in the Washington State. We played. We played from BC down to California, up the West Coast. We were all over the place.
Oh, so you're in Washington right now?
Yes.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get a picture of that, one of your posters, man. One of your guys' pre-show posters that you used to hang up. You had some pictures of those. The hair was the best, but everybody had cool hair back in the 80s, right? I mean, before we get to the next track, I do want to say that it's been pretty cool for me, Joe, because you haven't heard it, that my dad made an album. Maybe you could summarize for me, Dad, better, but a quick album in his own house back in the 90s. And didn't you record it in mono, if I'm correct, right? Or something, or you recorded it differently?
I did. I had a 4-track. God, I can't remember what kind of 4-track it was. It was all in mono, and I broke it down to make it 8 tracks. So, to make a long story short, after Matt was born, I quit playing music, sold all my gear, and then in the 90s, Matt moved up to Alaska. I came down to the south end of King County in Washington. Then I started getting, some Roland keyboards, and I got a Strat, and I started playing again, teaching myself keyboards. So I thought, I'm going to start writing some stuff. So I had written about maybe 10 or 12 songs just off of ideas for nobody but me. And then I gave Matt a copy of it. And
Azure, yep.
Yeah. So one song made it on the first album from that. But all the rest of them, they're still around somewhere.
Right on.
Yeah. No, it's pretty cool, Joe, because that was the only frame reference that I had. My dad said, "Oh yeah, I'm retiring. I'm going to start making music again." I'm like, "Well, is it going to be like your old stuff?" He's like, maybe." And I was really like telling him, like, "Can you please redo a couple of these?" Because I can send you a copy afterwards. I made a couple of YouTube videos when I just graduated college. I made a couple of just, normal YouTube slideshow videos, different pictures of my dad with the song. I mean, real basic, like what you could do when you were younger. But the song was in there, and nobody had really heard them before. So it was pretty cool. But then to see, where his music is now as compared to then has been pretty cool. So before I play it, Dad, what do you want to say about "So Shines a Good Deed in a Weary World"? I mean, I know about this song, but maybe you could tell everybody that I'm going to play it for, and the people that'll listen when the show's recorded. Where did the inspiration come from?
Okay, so we'll go back to like a rock jazz fusion thing, but I'm like Pat Metheny plays world jazz. I guess you would categorize it back in the 80s and early 90s with his group. And I dig that percussion and then just that kind of groove set to it, and not really in swing 6/8, none of that stuff. It's just a groove. And so I thought, let me see what I can do like this. And I'm thinking in my mind, I want it to be uplifting. And I remember my kids both liking the very first Willy Wonka movie. and I liked it too, because the Gene Wilder loved his movies. And I'm thinking, let's do something like, how would I interpret Willy Wonka in a song? The particular part was where he tells when Charlie hands him the gobstopper, then he goes, "So shines a good deed in a weary world." And I thought, okay, let's use this. So I came up with a chord progression on the keyboards, and then the melody line, like with all my music, the guitar melody line has to kind of speak like a voice. It's got to be some type of melody that you can follow, and not a lot of shredding, not a lot of busy stuff. Maybe when the emotional part comes, but you got to be able to follow. So I'm thinking that movie is at the end is very positive, and it goes through a lot of goofy stuff in the middle. So that's how I kind of came up with it. Is I came up with the verse and the chorus, which is a little bit more tension, and then the bridge part in the middle is just, it reminds me of that boat ride they took.
Yeah. So everybody, when you're listening to this, when we get to the bridge, try to see, excuse me, if you can pick out that part that Wonka is saying when they're on the boat before things get really creepy. I know that everybody should remember that part, even if you were a kid when you watched it with the bugs and all that weird stuff on the walls. Anyway, so why don't we listen to "So Shines a Good Deed in a Weary World"? It's a bit of a longer track, so I hope everybody enjoys it, and then we'll come back and talk about it for a few minutes before we get on to what you're working on in the future. Sound good?
Very good. Sound good.
Okay, great. So that is So Shines a Good Deed in a Weary World, also by Bobby Burrows on his latest album, which is trying to play a third song because it's so amazing. Looking Through a Tinted Lens. There you go, I got it. So, well, I mean, that was significantly different from you and I, which is really cool to see that both of them have been doing so well. Joe, let's get a hot take. I mean, I sent you that song already, I believe, when we first talked about the album, but what did you think?
Yeah. It's my favorite song on the album, number one. Okay. Your sense of melody is what I wish I could do. I mean, you got me singing along the second time around. You know, it's there's a craft to writing songs, you know, and being able to your brain wants to hear that melody again when it's good, and you brought it back. I mean, gosh, 3, 4, 5 times, you know. But it worked. Not all melodies work, you know. Not all melodies want to be heard over and over and over again. So that's what grabbed me into that. And then you throw in just enough of chops to, like, you know, flex the guitar muscles, and I think it's perfect. And man, I mean, I have geeky questions like, you know, like, were you running compressors on that stuff? Because the lines were so evenly done, and that's not easy to do with your hands, man. It was beautiful. The tones were great, but the song is a song. I mean, yeah, but it had the form that, I'm sorry, but you got to have a form to a song. You can't just do one long guitar solo. You can't just do the melodies and the verses. You got to have a form to it, and the balance on that song is what I like the best. The solo came just at the right time, but then in my head's like, I want to hear that melody one more time.
Yeah.
I can't sing it, of course.
Right.
And now it's stuck in my head. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's a skill, man. I know that it's a skill, and I don't know how it hits you. You know, some artists say they literally don't know how it happens. They sit there and their fingers just, you know, you learned all your scales 30 years ago. You learned all your phrasing. You learned your pentatonic boxes and your major scales, whatever you learned, right? And then did that melody specifically, how did it come to you? Give us the story.
Well, it was something that I was kind of hearing the beginning lines of the verse. Da 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 da. So I was hearing that in my head. So I kept playing on the loop on my Logic, the chords to the verse, and so I just started developing it from there. And once I think I took 2 times going through it, that I had it, because it was for me, it was simple, it was melodic, and it was going to tell part of the story. And then when the chorus comes up, where I'm hitting the higher register on the guitar and the synthesizer. So I wanted that a little bit more, not complicated, but a little bit more intricate, and a little bit of time shift on it. So it wasn't all just kind of right there, to interest the listener, along with, like, the type of lines I like to play. So that's how that came up. And it was first take, honest to God, first take on the chorus melody.
Sweet.
On the solos, like on that Wonka part, so I wanted to go a little bit out. So I did some, you know, like some major and minor descending lines that Matheny might use to kind of take it out of the chord tones, right?
Sure.
And then I didn't want to use it too much, because, you know, that can turn off a lot of basic listeners, right? To think, what is that stuff? He's playing out of key. But I just wanted to add a little bit to it. And then the solo coming out of it, of course, was in key. Some chromaticism in there, that type of stuff. But it was really fun to record that track. I mean,
oh, I bet.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
What do you have? Some doubling there with a flute or something?
It's a synthesizer. It's
sure.
I used it off of Logic, but I went into, you know, they have like 4 or 5 different synthesizers that makes in the sound library there, and I just altered it to sound kind of like an oboe flute mix, but not really both.
It's neat. It's really neat.
Yeah,
and that you played with on a keyboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
I play it on my MIDI controller, and you know, go straight into Logic, and just I alter it. All the songs aren't, you know, like boxed right out of there. I always alter them a little bit to my ear.
Sure. Awesome.
And that was one of the last songs you wrote for the album too, wasn't it? I mean, I feel like that came toward the end of the whole production process. You're like, hey, I got this really cool idea. I think I'm going to add it to the album, and it ends up being one of the more fun songs that you wrote. which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
awesome. I keep telling him, Joe, I after I heard that song, I'm like, can you promise me that your next album, you take it like more the whole thing in this kind of world jazz direction? Because I feel like as an artist evolves, I think when we were talking about this, Dad, on the phone, I talked about, for in my mind at least, Linkin Park was like my middle school, early high school, memories. And they were amazing when they came on the scene. Nobody had ever done anything like them, but you see how they evolved to where they loved the music, but not their fans necessarily. A lot of the fans are like, oh, this isn't how you work. But I just thought to myself, like, every band and musician has to evolve. You're not going to keep making 10 albums of the same music where then it becomes bland. So I'm really hoping, that, my dad goes in that direction of that last song, because I think there's some talent there that you just haven't uncovered fully yet. At least that's my opinion as a listener, but yeah.
Well, I told you it would, but I still got to put some rock into it. I can't go all straight jazz fusion type stuff. I have to put some rock type stuff in there, but
can't help it.
Yeah. So I'm, that's basically like that track is basically where my music taste is.
Awesome.
Let's compare that to You and I. You and I was cliche to me. I just wanted to write something. I don't know if cliche is the right word, but I wanted to write something really simple, but still beautiful that would tell a story. It could be you and I, meaning me and my wife, or me and my son Matt, or my daughters, or my Jada, Jackie, Jordan, all that stuff. I wanted to make it so people could interpret it personal to them. So that was an easy track to make. On this one, it was just strictly fun, and I dig that percussion and the funky bass line and a lot of drums. I love that stuff. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Joe, that makes me want to ask you. I mean, you said you're writing music right now. I mean, do you like having that balance when you're playing at shows, playing some of those more like mellow, easy, kind of easier to play, easy, like songs that you just know everybody's going to love no matter what, and then kind of mix it up with throwing something a bit more hard hitting and something that's tougher to play on the guitar? You like trying to find that mix?
Yeah, I mean, personally, and I think I speak for like my bands that I currently play with. It's like, for me, that you can get some ear fatigue going if you're just on 100 for longer than a couple of. I mean, when I say 100, I mean like, we have a dog.
I knew you'd idea. Is that Ollie? Ollie made an appearance.
This is hilarious. And now he's stuck. I might need to defer this question, Matt.
All right, we'll want to come back to you, Joe.
He's totally stuck. Give me a minute, man.
Oh, okay. This is awesome. Oh man, I take him off, but this is too funny. You can't make this stuff up.
That is funny.
He blends in with the in with the backdrop.
Get.
Oh man. Here, we'll let him take care of that for a minute. But okay. I mean, Dad. Again, to kind of throw this question back to you while Joe takes care of that, did you feel like when you're making an album too that you want some ebb and flow, just like Joe talked about? There's that ear fatigue that you can have when you're listening to an album. Like if it was the entire album was just like the last song we listened to, "So Shines a Good Deed in a Weary World," I feel like it would be like 100% up here the whole time. I mean, do you definitely try to do that? Try to balance it out?
Yeah, it's like Joe was saying, it'll create ear fatigue. And for me, I'm very conscious of that because I know what I like to hear. I know might be termed as overplaying or too much of one thing. So yeah, I mean, I could shred through a lot of those solos and make it very busy and all this other stuff, but that's not my style. So all set?
Sorry.
That was awesome, dude. I can't wait for everybody to go back and clip that. That's going to be perfect.
The best part is I had no idea. I'm not watching my screen.
I gotcha.
I'm practicing just looking at the camera. Someone told me to look at the camera.
Okay.
So I'm not looking. And then you guys start laughing and pointing, and I'm like, I didn't say anything funny. What's going on? Welcome to 2020 podcasting, right?
That's right, man.
Now, where were we? Yeah.
So we were talking, Joe, you were talking to me about ear fatigue and when you're playing a show, trying to mix it up. So
yeah. When I said at 100, so we're playing a potential, a bar gig, right? And you're playing a dance set for 30 minutes and people are going hard. They're dancing. And even the dancers need a break. So what do? You bust out a ballad out of nowhere, right? And And then sometimes maybe in the beginning of the night, there's like nobody there yet and you're sound checking. We play like a 15-minute Allman Brothers jam just to get ourselves warmed up. You know, we'll play like Whipping Post or Memory of Elizabeth Reed. You know, sweet melodies, great musicianship, but like the dancing people don't care about those songs. Mm-hmm. But as musicians, you know, so we try to balance the set out so everyone's taken care of. Sometimes in the middle of a song, even the bass player will be like, "Throw Bob a solo," and my guitar player's name is Bob, ironically, and throw Bob a solo. So we throw Bob a solo, and you know, and it kind of wakes him up because then we notice each other might be getting a little too comfortable and not really into it anymore, especially when you're on a gig that you've done, you know, hundreds of times, or wedding gig, you know, and you want to do right by the crowd. So to keep stuff fresh, getting back to what you asked, I mean, you got to blend the ballads with the dances, with the, you know, even as a guitar, even on this album, you got to blend the mellow ones. And Matt, like, he's got to throw in some of the rock things with the world jazz and it really gives the album some balance. And honestly, you might not have 100% of the fans 100% of the time interested, but I think as a musician, you're happy if you keep 100% of the fans, even if it's for 75% of the album, they're going to come back for more. And you might get more of the world jazz. You might get a handful of the rock guys. And I think this album really has all of it. So it's like, you know,
a little bit for everybody, right?
Yeah,
a little bit for everybody, yeah.
And guitar players will absolutely love this album. Musicians will too, and that's where you get the separation of, well, I kind of like more of the Metheny sounds, or you might get, well, I like a little bit more of the Satriani, Andy Timmons sounds, you know.
Yeah, right.
And then I love that your dad's like, I had no Satriani influence at all. Where I know that I have friends right at the top of my head that I will completely say, hey, check this album out because they are Satriani fans or Vi fans. And it's honestly it's a guitar club, man. Guitarists they'll just get it. They'll hear the tone right off the bat. They'll hear the tone first. You know, the tone is like their speaking voice, you know? When you meet your wife or your girlfriend, you hear her voice, it's the first thing you remember about her. Like, oh, wow, that's what she sounds like. Okay, great. Mm-hmm. And you're either drawn to that or you're not, you know? Mm-hmm. So anyway, and if you played a guitar in a paper bag, probably not going to come back and listen to that again, you know. So,
right. No, for sure. No, I think that's a great point that you bring up. I mean, I think the music differentiation on this album is a bit greater than the first. I mean, obviously, Kagiyan from the first album is my favorite. I think it's the most unique song. It sounds amazing. But this album, there's, again, like I said, there's a little bit for everybody there, and it was really cool, Joe, because Dad, you were on a podcast or like a radio show, live radio show recently, right? You were featured on there, and he's a guitarist himself, and to hear him talking about, you know, a lot of technical things that I understand, but I couldn't do them, and listen to the admiration and appreciation from that side of things, I think that really hit home, Joe, because as a guitarist, I think any guitarist that listens to this will find an appreciation in the music. So
totally.
Speaking of future projects, Joe, I know you mentioned that you're working on making some music. Dad, you're working on your second Christmas album currently. Is that correct?
Well, it's
or an updated version.
Yeah, it's the second version of it. So talking with my wife Elida, who handles the majority of the business here, we're thinking like, well, let's do a new Christmas album. I said, nah, I don't want to do that this time. So she goes, why don't you add to this? So I said, okay, here's what we'll do is, you know, we'll keep the first one that I released last year up until November, and then we'll take that offline and release another updated version of the 4 songs that were on the EP plus a new one. So we're going to do that for maybe a couple of years and see how that goes. But yeah, I started working. Let's see, we released Tinted Lens in August. I started working in September on Oh Holy Night, a version of my version of that song. And so worked on that, almost done with the mastering of it, or the mixing of it. There's a few things I just wanted as close to perfect as I could get it. And then we'll add that to the EP that was up, and it'll have a whole, and the 4 songs that I had on there, I've rearranged them, remixed them, added parts to it. So it'll be totally different and fresh. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing for that.
Awesome. Well, I have a little screen share here for everybody. Anybody that's interested in the very first one that you made. Dad, can you take us through how many of these are you redoing, and what are you adding to this album here?
So all four of them have been remixed, remastered. There's a few new parts on Do You Hear What I Hear? And I changed Have Yourself a Merry Christmas. I listened to some David Gilmour, and I thought, okay, let me put a little something in there. So in the intro, I put in a little Gilmour stuff to it.
Nice.
And the rest of them are just remastered and remixed. And then, of course, Oh Holy Night will be the new edition.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. I told you when you sent that out, that was one that really stood out to me. And someone like Joe is saying it was a perfect song. Joe, you know this from Jen talking to you about it. You know, we as teachers, we have those days where we have work days and we're just sitting in front of our computer just grading. And for me, that he had sent me that track when, you know, we're getting ready for report cards, and I just put it on a loop, man, and I just listened to it. And that's what's so fun about music that doesn't have any vocalists in it for me, is that I kind of can put that aside and really focus in instrumentally on different parts and not get pulled away listening to the vocals as much. And yeah, really good music on there, especially because you can hear the parts from the Christmas songs that we've heard, you know, on the radio. Every time you go into the store, it's the same version playing. It's nice to hear little bits and pieces of that. So yeah, definitely worth checking out for anybody that has enjoyed my dad's music so far. Joe, have you ever done any Christmas shows by any chance? I mean, have you ever done anything holiday themed? That doesn't seem like it'd be up your alley, so I'm not.
No, I love
sure.
it. Oh,
yeah. Okay.
I'm the guy who puts the Christmas music on probably before Thanksgiving. I'm that guy.
Nice. Get the lights up, dude.
Yeah, no, I love Christmas music. I love to play it. And as long as I can strum a guitar, I mean, you know, the people used to bust out the charts at the family dinners back in the day, right? Oh, come on, let's play a couple and sing along. All right, we'll do that. But we've never actually performed. I had to really think about this, but I don't think we've ever actually done like a Christmas show. However, we've done, again, these said bar gigs. Not so much the weddings. The weddings, you got to play it a little more straight and narrow. But the bar gigs we've done over the years, one comes to mind where we're jamming a song. Okay, it could have been the Allman Brothers. I don't even remember. But we're jamming, and then all of a sudden I'm throwing. It was Painted Black, Rolling Stones. And in that lick, you know, then all of a sudden I'm throwing in. I throw the, and then we're doing Drummer Boy, and then we're doing. So I can't say we've done a Christmas. That's the extent of my Christmas music. But we threw Jingle Bells in. You know, the band gets bored sometimes. You know, and I shouldn't say bored's the wrong word. The band gets complacent, and then you throw one of those, and then the whole band's looking at you like, "What are you doing there?" And then everyone's smiling and laughing, and then you just go with it. We've always talked about trying to get at least a set worth of tunes. But it's I don't know. It would be fun to record one, especially with Jen singing. I think it would be fun.
That's exactly what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Just to give you and everybody listening the idea, Jen, I saw a clip of her singing the really high parts from Pink Floyd when you did, and Joe, you guys did, I think it was a weekend Pink Floyd tribute type show here in Sitka, right?
Yeah, 2 years in a row we've done that.
All right.
Wow.
And Jen sings. Jen, and I wish we could. I don't even know how to screen share. She sang "Great Gig in the Sky" off of the Dark Side of the Moon album. With Claire Torrey as the studio singer was on it, but Jen absolutely murdered it. And what people don't realize is she had to sing it like 80 times that week in rehearsals. You know? So there was some, and a lot of it is high end screaming, literally screaming. So she had to pace herself for that too. But it sure is fun being in a band with Jen. And some of the stuff, like even the band we'll be playing, I never forget. We're doing the Great Gig in the Sky, and I looked at the drummer, and Ed Littlefield's like playing along, and he's like, "Wow, like whoa!" And it's just real. And you know, Bobby, playing in bands, you know, someone might have hit the right solo or the right something, and you just look at each other, and those are the moments you live for as a musician, where you all get it, and it's actually happening. You're not just doing the gig to make the money. You're actually just making some cool music, even if you're replicating someone else's songs. It's, you know, but we want to take that energy, Matt. I mean, yes, we've done the Pink Floyd and the Queen tribute, and we've done them pretty good, I thought, actually. Definitely. But we wanted to get that reaction with our own songs, and it's so hard, man. But you can't rewrite a Pink Floyd hit. You got to find your own, and that's when it makes the most sense. I'm sure Bobby can write "Cause He's Ended His Lovers," Jeff Beck, beautiful ballad, instrumental, and it's a song I would love to actually hear your dad play. I've actually recorded my version of it. Which maybe we'll do on a different podcast, Matt.
Yeah, definitely.
But it was my intro to the world of recording instrumental guitar. So I found a backing track online, honestly, and then it was so easy to just plug in like my tone over that. But where was I going with this? Oh, we're talking about instrumentals. Now Bobby's found his groove, and he sits down, he can write his own, and I think he has the mentality of this is what I like, and this is what I'm going to put out there. Take it or leave it. At the end of the day, you got to say take it or leave it, because you could drive yourself crazy trying to write the hit. There's plenty of hit makers out there that have a producer cracking a whip. No, it needs a catchier chorus. No, do it this way, do it that way. But where a guy like Bobby, he plays it, like he played that melody, he loved it, he kept it, and he said it was a one take, right? And that's it. And it just came so natural to you. And that's when the magic is so beautiful. And I know I can feel with you. You had that moment of, this is nice. Let's record this now. And I could take the loop off then we got to make a B part, and then we need a bridge, and then we need a solo. But that's when it gets fun. And the art is just, just takes you places. And yeah, and again, you've got that down, Bobby. It's awesome.
Dad, you sent me a text. You remember that when you got that very first part of that song? You said, "Son, I got an idea for this song. It's off Willy Wonka." And I'm like, "Wow, you already hooked me. Let's go." And it's just Joe Wright. First part came together, and then it all just started kind of falling into place off of that one part. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with Joe. I mean, making the music. He said something like, you kind of take it or leave it. Well, after spending years of playing other people's music, going down to LA and being told, well, don't play too fast, or, do this here. And I thought, I really want to do this on my own. And so it's kind of like, I mean, it wasn't to that point. It's kind of like, well, you either take it or leave it. It's like, I hope you like it. If you don't, that's cool. If you do like it, that's cool too. And so the first album, I would have to say, compared to this one, the first one, I'm trying to find a niche that kind of had that 880 or 808 drum loop thing going behind. It's kind of hip hoppy, so I might draw some of those people in. And I really shouldn't have done that. I should have stayed more true to myself, like I did in this one. I mean, I'll put some of those drum machine type things in there just for a little bit, but I wanted it mostly acoustic, right? Yeah. But I felt more at ease with this because it was kind of like, hey, I hope you like it. This is me. This is what I like to do. And the response has been, I mean, mind-blowing. I'm really happy about it. I never expected it to be like this. And like we're talking about the song You and I kind of put that in there as a simple type little thing that, I kind of like this. This is pretty. And I wrote it when my wife and Jackie, they were over in France, and I kind of missed her. I'm thinking, I hope people like this, because to me it sounds really beautiful. And here's something that's really it might piss people off, it might throw them, but I had listened to a couple of tracks of the Carpenters, and when I was a kid, you guys, we used to make fun of the Carpenters because that stuff is bad, But if you listen to the production on there and how they use strings as an emotional throw in it, I thought, gosh, let me see if I can kind of incorporate that with the strings in there, because it kind of hit me. And so I wrote it using the acoustic first for the chords, and it had to be finger picked, not with a pick. I wanted it to be soft and kind of dull sounding, not so bright. And so the verse, the bridge, the chorus, it was that same couple hours. I just did it. And so then I got out the guitar, and I'm thinking, how would you sing this melody if you were a vocalist, and talking about whether it be your wife or your kids or something? And so, ba-bum, ba-bum, and answering it and telling a story. So I had it done that Sunday. The whole thing was done. And I started to build on it with the strings, a little bit more embellishment with the acoustic piano. And it's like, wow, this sounds pretty good. But I never in my wildest dreams thought it would be like the most streamed song off the album. Over 5,000, almost 6,000 streams.
That's
awesome.
great.
And to have it played over in Finland on that guy's radio show, that blew me away.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Joe, do you find, like, all three of us are big fans of music, and I mentioned Linkin Park, and the only reason I bring them up again is one of the most popular songs ever is called Numb. I don't know if you've ever heard it, Joe. I know my dad doesn't listen to them, but Numb, when I listened to the interview with the band, they said that was the easiest song they've ever made to this day. I think it took them 2 days to make it.
Is that the big hit? Is that their big hit?
It's in the top 5 for sure.
Okay.
It's very simple. There's nothing crazy going in it. The vocals are simple. The guitar is very simple. There's not a lot of crazy production. It's just a very straightforward song. I often wonder, like, what the two of you think. Think about some of your favorite songs you've ever heard. How many of them are just those very simple songs? And like, maybe that's an avenue to go down every time you make an album. Like, Joe, you're making music now. I mean, are you going to think about putting something a little more, streamlined, easy going in there to appeal to those people?
Because it's such a process sometimes of songwriting. You sit down, right? And some days you don't even want to hold the guitar. You're just like, this is not the right day, and you got too much on your mind, maybe. So you got to be in the right frame of mind. And then when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, if I sit down with my wife Jen, I'm not going to write a Metallica song because I know it's not going to fit her genre. But we've said things like, okay, look, we love playing the Fleetwood Mac songs. We love playing Susan Tedeschi Trucks songs. Now, we don't want to rip them off, of course, but let's think of that vibe. And let's think, well, we like that one song. Rhiannon has its 2-chord verse, and then it's 1 chord to the chorus. There's not even a bridge in that song. But let's take that theory. Not the actual A minor to F. Let's just take the theory of, hey, 2 chords. What do you want? Hum something over this. Like your dad was looping. He said until he found so it's a musician's tool to hear the chords over and over again as you're practicing, especially when you don't have your band in your living room. You just have that loop going. But I would loop 2 chords, and Jen she recorded them onto her phone actually, and she goes, I got to listen to these when I'm on my walk or on a hike, and she'll just hum to herself. And then that muse, it either hits you or it doesn't, But it's so hard because I have plenty of demos on my computer that sound like Foo Fighter songs. And I love the Foo Fighters. They're not my favorite band, but it's for some reason that's what came out. Like I put those automatic drum beats on GarageBand or Logic, and this is what comes to me. And then I'll even sing a couple of melodies. The words mean nothing because I don't write lyrics at all. But so that's why it's good to have Jen around because she writes lyrics and melodies. Speaking of melodies, the Carpenters. Oh my gosh! As a grown-up. No, as a grown-up, I bought their Greatest Hits 1 and 2 and all the volumes.
There you go.
It's like hit after hit after and of course I was 5 years old again because my mom was listening to the Carpenters when she was making dinner. But of course, as a kid, I'm like, I want to put Kiss on. Like, I don't want to hear the Carpenters,
Right.
But then as a grown-up, I just revisited the Carpenters. I'm going back to like my 20s and 30s. And singing along to every single song, even though I didn't know the words, but you knew those melodies. You even knew the harmonies because they were embedded in your brain. They're so deliciously good. And then, of course, those arrangements. I mean, yeah, they knew what they were doing. Bert Bacharach, right? Putting his trumpet lines in there. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh. When you said Carpenters, I haven't listened to them in a couple of years. I'm going to have to dig those up again. So thanks for that.
So good point that you just said it, Bert Bacharach. So when I was a kid, my dad would listen to The Look of Love and a lot of Bacharach stuff because his chord voicings and it's very jazzy. So I always loved that song, The Look of Love. So what did I do? I made my own version on this album.
Right.
I had watched. We have a station here. It's called, Axe, I think, or something like that. It's a music channel, and they play concert videos. And they had Bert Bacharach with Ron Isley, and I watched their version of The Look of Love, and it had this horn line on it. So I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to keep it kind of true to the original version. So I did it, and man, I mean, I love that stuff. Back then, when I was a kid, we wanted to listen to Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and all the heavy stuff in Chicago, the heavy jazz, all this stuff, and no way are we going to listen to the Carpenters or Bacharach. I mean, that's like, that's crap. But now,
right.
The stuff is so beautiful.
That was unintentional, by the way. I didn't bring him up because the song was on your record. Unintentional.
Right.
But the Carpenters reminded me of those trumpet lines. So simple. There was definitely nothing. I mean, Miles Davis he had chops, but he didn't have like John Coltrane chops. Right. Miles Davis could play a melody in the middle of an improvisational jam and just completely stab you in the heart with it. And that's what made Miles Davis magical, of course. But the point of that, Bert Bacharach, I mean, even Jeff Beck, they wrote these guitar lines that were just simple. Because, Matt, when I talk to you, well, I do tend to talk fast. But the average person, when they talk with a cadence. The pauses are important, right? You know, if people talk to you like this the entire time and didn't give you a chance to not get, you would turn them off immediately, you know? But if people said, hey, Matt, I got a question for you. Guess what I thought of the other day? I just looped you in, and now you can't wait to see what I'm going to ask you, you know? And there's a tone to our voices. They're almost like melodies. Somebody said that once. I think it was Jeff Beck, actually. And I try to apply that to my guitar solos. When I'm improvising, I remember that pauses are like breaths. And I even did an exercise in school back in the day as a student, to actually play and put a forced pause in the middle of it and see how you get out of it. And that's how we talk, right? Nice. It's how we talk. Again, not me. I talk a little too fast sometimes. But again, playing music is like talking. And I think the Bert Bacharachs of the world did it the best. And, you know, they were concise, yet they got their message across in, you know, I mean, it only takes 3 words to say I love you, right? And you just hear that from the right person. And that's it. You didn't need to hear anything else, you know?
Right.
That's as sappy as I'm getting on you, by the way. That's it.
That's great. That's great. This is why I wanted you to be on here, Joe. You know, just for anybody that is watching that doesn't know what Joe does, Joe has taken over the spectacular radio show at Raven Radio for Mike Vieira years ago, which that was my foray into being on a show where people could hear my voice, and I said a lot, and I said the same words a lot, and then my dad came along and said, hey, you know, try not to do that as much, and try to do this and try to this, and so then going on with you and listening to you, I thought, oh yeah, you'd be perfect to come on here and ask the questions that I, you know, can't think about because I'm not in a musical frame of mind. If we were talking basketball, yeah, I'd probably sound like you, and you'd be sitting there like, oh man, God, this is cool, like learning something new today, you know. But I think it's been really cool to just kind of hear, you know, different things about the music, Dad, because I feel like you've grown so much as a musician within this last year, and I felt like there was less fatigue during this whole recording process of this album. You kind of just hit the ground running, and you had a couple days where you're like, you know what, I've messed with this song for 20 hours. I'm taking a break, you know, but you came back and got it done. And man, at the end of the first album, right, like a day before it came out, 2-3 days before it came out, you're like, I wonder if I should change this, and I wonder if I should change this. This time you were just like, these songs are ready to go. Yeah. And it just makes me excited for the future. I mean, what do you kind of see looking ahead? You know, you got this Christmas album that you're reworking. What else are you planning, you know, in the future here?
So in January, I'll start working on the 3rd album. And I've already got some ideas. So the ideas that came to me, I just recorded them real quick so I wouldn't forget them at my old age. But it's kind of like a Good Deed type stuff. With some rock edge to it. It's going to be kind of, maybe it carries on from this last album, but hopefully it's going to be a little bit step further towards me as I hear my music, I guess, if I was to try to explain it. But I'm going to start working in January, and we'll go for a summer release. That's about it.
Awesome. And it's hard to put a timeline on things, though, right, Bobby? It's hard to say, you know, or maybe the opposite. Like sometimes I need a deadline. Sometimes I work better, you know.
The deadline thing works.
You guys still have me out there?
Because Joe, the deadline thing works for me because I'm used to it from what my occupation was before I retired. So used to deadlines, and I work better under that type of thing. So that's why I'm said that to start in January, because I want all the songs, their basic form done months before, so I can really fine tune them like I did in this last album and really take my time.
Can't wait to hear it, man.
Well, hey, before we get going, Dad, where's the best place to find your music? I did have somebody ask where they could get a physical CD as well. I don't know if those are still out there for sale, but can you clue us in real quick where the best place to access your music is?
Sure. So let's start with the physical CDs. I have physical CDs of Everlasting still. And the reason I don't have physical CDs of Tinted Lens because there's no touring right now. There's no promoting, playing out like I did with the other one. So once things open up after COVID, then we're going to release that in the hard copy as well. But for streaming purposes and for what works best for me is Spotify. You can follow me on Spotify. Spotify is just Bobby Burrows, and you'll see the albums there. Apple Music. I have more fans and more response from Spotify than I do from Apple Music. But all digital streaming music things, the albums, all the songs are there. For the Christmas release, if you want to have a copy of the first version of Do You Hear What I Hear, I suggest that you buy it from iTunes or download it on Spotify before we take it down and put up the new version. But that's what we got right now. And if they want to buy a copy of Everlasting, just contact you and contact me, and I'll send them a copy in the mail.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Joe, I know you got to get going, but Joe, thanks again for taking the time, man. It was awesome to have you here and
it's fun, man.
Talk about music.
Oh, I love to talk, and I love to talk music and guitar. This could go on for hours, honestly.
Right.
Well, hey, can we get verbal confirmation that you guys will try to do some kind of cool collab? I mean, since you both have Logic Pro.
I'm in,
Bobby. Yeah.
All we have to do is I send streams back and forth on Dropbox.
Let's try it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
And Matt, you're going to crack the whip in our little group chat, okay?
Yeah, that's right. I'll make sure it happens.
I think guys like Bobby, guitar players sometimes need a little nudge. Like, hey, you guys said you're going to do something. Has that started yet? So.
Right. Well, hey, that's going to be fun. I really look forward to that. Well, thanks again for everybody listening. This is Audio Credentials episode 3, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.
Peace.
See you guys.